All right, so next up is Priest. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, other than a couple cards. I really don't think these are very good. So the Undead package is the first one we're going to talk about. We got almost like an Undead aggro tempo style deck they're encouraging. You got things like Animate Dead to reanimate your cheap undeads. You got Undying Allies. After you play an undead this turn, give it reborn. It's 0, so that's pretty cool. You got Shadow Word Undeath. So deal 2 to all enemies. If a friendly undead died after your last turn, you deal 2 more. Note that this is one-sided. So this is deal 2 to all enemies, and if you play an undead, you deal 2 more to all enemies. So that's not to your minions, just to theirs. So this card to me seems like the reason to play that deck if you can. Anytime you have a one-sided wrath effect like that's this powerful, it's worth running. You're never going to be happy about casting this for just the first half, but you'll always be happy about casting it for 4. So if you have a deck that always has this, can always have this reliably, consistently turned on, then this is going to be a very good card. Some of the other stuff, so you have here a Bone Caller. This is not an undead. It's a taunt with Death Rattle, resurrect a friendly undead that died this game. This card seems a little bit harder to pull off. Maybe you run this in a bigger, like a bigger style priest deck where you run bigger undeads to try and resurrect. Doesn't seem great if all you're bringing back is like a 3/3 or a 2/2 or something like that. I'm less excited about it because it's just such a bad rate on the actual card. Like a 4-mana 2/4 is not a good body. This card I don't see seeing very much play. Haunting Nightmare is an undead. Death Rattle, haunt a card in your hand. When you play it, summon a 3/3 soldier. So you basically get 2 3/3s for this, but one of them is delayed compared to like the new Death Knight card that's a 3/3, and then you just spend corpses and get it immediately. This card seems pretty weak. I did see that Celestalon said that this originally made another Haunting Nightmare. So when you played the card it haunted, you got another one of these, which doesn't kind of let you chain it. That would have been really strong and really interesting, but they said for balance reasons they had to change it. I don't see it seeing play in the form it's in, though. Next up, we have Grave Digging. Again, I tandem this with the Shadow Word Undeath card that we looked at just a minute ago. This is the reason you want to run Undead. If you're running an Undead aggro deck, this is the reason to run it. A 1-mana draw 2, that's just very, very strong. We've seen play consistently and for all of Hearthstone and any card game. You know, drawing cards is good. Drawing cards for cheap is very good. So a 1-mana draw 2 is going to be insanely strong. This is why you're running Undead. Last up, we got the exciting one. High Cultist Basaleph. So Battlecry, resurrect all friendly undead that died after your last turn. I want this card to be strong. I want this card to be good because it's got a really cool flashy effect. I think this card will be fine. I don't think it's going to be exciting. If you're running an undead like aggro deck, bringing back a bunch of cheaper undead, it might be a good follow-up to a board wipe, but it also is going to sit dead in your hand a lot, and it has to be the ones that died after your last turn. That new wording they're kind of using for the undead, that's kind of the undead theme. It just seems harder to pull this off. Yeah, I know. You can also kind of use it as just like the other one I talked about, where you can kind of res bigger undead. So maybe you play like a big taunt, and they kill it on their turn. You play this, you get the big taunt back. Still, like, it's like a 5-mana 3/5 that gets you a 1 big minion with a condition that you have to have had it die. I don't know how good this is. We'll see. I would love to be wrong about this. And that's really it for the undead package. I want this to be good. I think the Grave Digging, Shadow Word, Undeath cards are very, very strong. The rest of it I'm less excited about. So honestly, we'll just have to see if these are strong enough that it makes it worth running the undead package, then it'll see play. If these end up not being enough to make the weaker cards, things like Bone Caller and Haunting Nightmare worth running, then it probably won't see play. So I could see this being something that ends up being good after rotation. Next up is the Shadow package. So this is a little bit of a smaller package. So I do want to point out the Shadow Word Undeath, Grave Digging, Undying Allies are all also shadow cards, but there's kind of this weird Undead Allies. Yeah, all these are shadow cards, and Animate Dead is shadow. So those all sort of fit in with the rest of the shadow package. And the issue is some of the other cards. So like Crystal Smith Cultist, if you're holding a shadow spell, gain +1. A 1-mana 2/3 is very good. Now, the problem is, if you're an aggro deck, you want minions early. You don't want shadow spells. So I don't think this is as good as it looks. When I first saw this card, I thought it was nuts. And then the more I thought about it, the more I was kind of like, we'll just have to see. Finding the balance for this to where it's, because a 1-mana 1/2 that does nothing, doesn't give you any effect or anything. It's also not undead, which is kind of a big deal. It makes it a lot harder to utilize this. Means it doesn't trigger all your undead stuff. So it has this like an anti-synergy with a lot of the shadow spells we got this set. That said, for Wild, this is probably I could definitely see this making the cut in the aggro Shadow Priest, but it isn't a pirate. It doesn't synergize with some of your other stuff, so maybe not. But I mean, it's an interesting card, and it's definitely worth building around to see if you can make it work. So we'll see. Next up, we have the legendary Sister Svalna. Svalna? I don't know how you say it. Sister lady person. Here, cool. Battle cry. Permanently add a Vision of Darkness to your hand. So this is Vision of Darkness. It's 3 mana to discover a shadow spell, and this stays in your hand. So this is a super slow value card. Basically, this is infinite value, right? You get a Vision of Darkness. Every turn you can discover a shadow spell. The Vision of Darkness is 3 mana, though, so that's kind of how they balance it, right? Paying 3 to discover a shadow spell is a lot worse than some of the other effects we've seen in the past, right? We've seen 3 mana, discover a spell, discount your whole hand of spells. We've seen 2 mana, discover a spell from your deck. We've seen 1 mana, heal, discover a spell. So this just discovers a shadow spell and it stays in your hand. This just seems really slow. I would love to be in a meta where this is good enough, but I don't think we're in it right now. So I don't think this will see play. It's a 6 mana card that hits the board and doesn't have any impact to the board, doesn't have taunt, doesn't heal you, doesn't have life steal, doesn't have any of that. It just gets on the board and gives you some value later on. Infinite value, mind you, which is great, but yeah, I don't see this being as strong of a card as people are hoping. I've seen people be like, oh, that card's crazy. It's like, no, it's really not, unfortunately. So that's it for the shadow package. It's a real, like, technically half of the set almost is shadow spells for priest, but I don't think there's enough here to make shadow priest better in standard. Maybe there's a shadow undead combination deck. Like, I could see that. We didn't talk about Mind Eater. I did forget to talk about this one for the undead part. Also goes into the Thief Priest style of deck. Also goes into Death Rattle Priest and Wild that runs all the steel effects. So we've got the full cycle now. You can run a 1-drop, a 2-drop, and a 3-drop, and a 4-drop, right? Anyway, 2 4-drops actually. So maybe there's some sort of combination Thief, or not the Shadow Undead Archbishop Benedictus aggro deck that runs this too, and you just run all this stuff, and you know, maybe that ends up being strong, but I don't think it's going to be better than what Priest has going on right now. It's hard to top 2 2020s on turn 5, which is what they do now. So I tend to think this will have to wait till after rotation, unfortunately. I guess we'll wait and see. Next up, we have Warrior, and Warrior got some really interesting cards this set. So the main package they got, I'm kind of going to lump it together, is the fire spell / like enrage aggro minion, which they got a lot of cards for. So let's go ahead and just start. So, Light of the Phoenix. Draw 2 cards. Cost 1 less for each damage friendly character. Remember when I said draw 2 for 1 is good? Well, draw 2 for 0 is also good. So, yeah, this card's good. It's also got like an insanely strong synergy with Sun Fury Champion, because this card says after you cast a fire spell, deal 1 damage to all minions. I see people saying this card, they don't see it being good. I think it gets there. I really do. This card alone kind of makes me want to run that card, Light of the Phoenix, because it just has such good synergy with that card. You know, that card damages everything, then you get to play Light of the Phoenix for free. Really good. The other card, Blazing Power, also a fire spell. Give a minion +1/+1 and repeat for each damage-friendly character. Also has really good synergy with the 1-drop. Kind of a different way than what we're used to in Warrior, damaging our own minions using the spells and stuff. But I think these cards could work. They have such good synergy with the 1-drop in the games where you curve out with the 1-drop Sun Fury Champion into these other cards. You're going to be really, really happy. Next up, for the fire package, we have a Sunfire Smithing. You equip a 4/2 sword and give a random minion in your hand +4/+2. This one I'm less excited about. This will get run only if you need the additional fire spells to make your other stuff work, like Champion. Otherwise, I don't see this being something that works. So that gets played in the deck. Next up for the fire package, we have Thoribalor. It's an elemental. It's a phoenix. So it's a 4-mana 4/4 rush, which is just fine on rate. It's not terrible, but it's not something you're super excited about. But then it has Death Rattle. You go dormant, because we know dormant means it's still on board, but it can't be targeted or anything. It can't be used. Cast a fire spell to revive Thoribalor. So that's really interesting. You can revive it up to 2 times. So you get basically 3 4/4 rushes for 4 mana if you can cast fire spells. And as we just discussed, this one's going to cost 0 a lot of times. This one only costs 2. That one, but it seems to me like this could make it just on synergy alone. Being able to have that consistent tempo to keep controlling the board with makes me think that this Enraged Warrior deck could have the legs to really make a push in the new standard. So I'm excited about this. I think this is one of the better packages. I hope I'm not wrong. This card and this one in particular are going to rely solely on how good the other 3 cards work in tandem and how much use we can make of the fire spells and warrior. But I'm definitely excited to try, so we'll see how that goes. Next up for warrior, we have a very small taunt package. I'm just going to go ahead and spoil this. It's not very good. The one thing I did forget to mention last when I was talking about the fire spells is this card, Embers of Strength. I think this card also fits in that deck. Think about the synergy this has. So you go turn 1, Sun Fury Champion. Turn 2, Embers of Strength. This will resolve. Then he deals 1 damage. So all 3 of these are now damaged, which makes this already only one mana, right? Pretty strong. If you have, if you're on the coin, maybe you put another 1 drop down, and then you have, this on the same turn, which I know, okay, it kills these, but you can also 1, 2, weapon, buff these up, Light of the Phoenix, all this stuff, it just synergizes really well. I could see that being really, really good. All right, back to the top package, because top package is much less exciting. So, like I said, I think this is a very good card. Embers of Strength gives you 2 1/2 guards with taunt. Mana Thirst 6, give them +1/+2, so that's 2 2/4s with taunt for 2 mana. So on 6, you can play that with a Sun Fury Champion into this, into something like this on an existing minion, and that's all just really, really strong. It's like a board refill all in 1 turn. I could definitely see that being something that works. The other taunt cards are much less exciting. We have Last Stand. It's 4 mana. That's a lot of mana. Remember how I said drawing 2 or 1 or 2 mana is good? Drawing 1 for 4 is not good. So you draw a taunt minion and you double its stats. Doubling stats is good, but that's a huge, if that's your turn 4, your turn 5 better be a giant ass taunt or you're just gonna die, right? So the other taunt card that we got was this one, 6 mana, 4/8 with rush and taunt, and can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. This one also kind of fits into the last package for warrior, the anti-spell package, which is also a very small package that I'll kind of talk about in a second. But this is just not super exciting on rate. If you double this with the Last Stand, this becomes an 8/16. That's a lot better. Then yeah, this is a crazy card. 8/16 that can't be targeted, but it still has taunt. So they can still trade off for it, I just don't see it, paying 4 mana to draw 1 card, even if it does get its stats doubled, does not seem worth. So I don't think this taunt package is going to be good at all. Fortunately, it makes me sad because I love Taunt Warrior. One of my first legends was with Fireplume's Heart. I love that card. So sad, but not good. Last is the anti-spell package, and there's really, like I said, Silver Fury Stalwart kind of fits into that. Not very good. This is by far the weakest of the 3 cards. The other ones we have are Asphodon, the Grand Shield. So this is a legendary, 3 mana, 3/3. In Battlecry, cast a copy of the last spell your opponent played. So they have confirmed that the targets from the spell that you recast will be random, which I assumed. But this to me is a really interesting card. So for one, I just want to say amazing flavor, right? He's the Grand Shield. You see him here deflecting the spell. So it's like they cast the spell, he comes in the next turn, bounces it back to him. That's just a really cool flavor. I love that. I actually think this card is really good. It's one of those things where there's a lot of really powerful spells in Standard right now. And if your opponent say you're playing against Druid, right? You're playing against Druid and they're doing their stuff, they're ramping their things, and you're a control warrior, and usually they ramp with Nourish on 5 mana, and then you are screwed because they're so far ahead on mana, you just can't ever catch up on tempo. Well, instead you go here and you cast Asphodon, the Grand Shield, And while if it's the split one from the jerry rig, you'll guarantee get the mana ramp. If not, you might end up getting draw. But either way, I mean, draw 3, get a 3/3. That's not bad. But if you get the ramp, then you're just right on board. Like you're at the same pace with them. It makes your game a lot easier to play. That's just like an example I thought of off the top of my head. There's a lot of like, what if they go Miracle Growth? You go Miracle Growth, make a 10/10 taunt yourself. You also have a 3/3. Maybe you're playing against a deck with a lot of removal, or maybe you're playing against Thief Priest and they cast I just forgot the name. And they cast like a big board clear, and then you have this the follow up when they make their board, you can kill their board. So maybe you're playing against Priest and they play the 3 mana steal spell where they copy 2 cards from your hand. You play this, you get to copy 2 cards from their hand. And there's a lot of different niche cases for this that I think for 3 mana, the opportunity cost is so low. This is a good card. The other spell, kind of anti-spell card that Warrior got is a really interesting one. The name is Disruptive Spellbreaker, and at the end it says, at the end of your turn, your opponent discards a spell. This is random, so they'll discard a random spell from their hand. You don't get to pick, but this is something we've never seen before, and I think this is a really interesting design because, you know, there's a lot of decks that rely heavily on the spells in their hand to pull off whatever combos or stuff they're doing. A Phylactery Warlock is an example that comes immediately to mind. Druid is another class that a lot of their spells are very important to what their game plan is, you know, like Celestial Alignment. If your opponent goes turn 5 Nourish to ramp mana, and then you play this, then you discard their big card draw or alignment or whatever they were trying to ramp into, suddenly their hand is garbage, and you just have this thing on board that's going to keep disrupting them. That said, as much as I want this to be an awesome card, he's a 5 mana 4/5, and playing a 5 mana 4/5 in your deck feels bad. So this will be highly contingent on the meta, like what the meta looks like. This is not going to be a card you just want to run just because. This is going to be a card you run with the intention of countering certain strategies with its effect. All right, so don't just put this in every warrior deck. It's not going to be good. Actually, I think it would be kind of fun to build a like an enraged warrior deck, but the minions you're trying to buff with the 1/4 are stuff like this. So you just drop this on turn 5 and it's like a 12-14 or 12-13, and then it's almost impossible for them to kill. They just keep discarding spells. It'll be great. That said, that's a very niche case. It's not going to work like that most of the time. You can't guarantee what gets the buff. So don't think this is a good card, sadly. I do think the legendary is pretty awesome, the Grand Shield Asphodon, but yeah, don't think this card is going to see any play. Next up, we have Shaman, and Shaman got 2 major packages this set. The first one being the big minion package. So we got these cards here: Prescience, draw 2 for each that costs 5 or more, or draw 2 minions, sorry, for each that costs 5 or more. Summon a 2/3 Spirit with Taunt. From the other side, summon a copy of each minion in your hand. They attack random enemy minions, then die. Blightblood Berserker, Taunt, Lifesteal Reborn. Death Rattle, deal 3 to a random enemy. Remember, Lifesteal, so the Death Rattle is also Lifesteal. And it has Reborn, so you're going to get 2 Death Rattles. And it's a taunt, so they have to attack into it. So this is a lot of healing in one card. And then Overlord Drakuru, Rush and Wind Fury, 9 mana, 6/8. After this attacks and kills a minion, resurrected on your side. Ooh. And that's really it for the big minion package, I guess you could call it. I was going to say, I want this to be good. And in standard, maybe there is a deck that can run this. Here's the problem with this. This is what you're building your deck around, right? From the other side. Here's the thing, is it's 10 mana, right? So not only is it 10 mana, you got to wait till 10 mana to play it. These cool minions right here, the Berserker and the Overlord, you can't play them on 8 and 9, right? Because this has to have them in your hand. So they have to be in your hand still when you play from the other side. That's kind of a big problem. So if you're not playing this on 8 to survive, how are you surviving? But if you play it on 8, you have less minions for this. This seems super fun. I'm going to try this. Maybe there's some sweet like OTKs or combos you can pull off with this to kill people. That'll be awesome. Totally do it. However, I don't think this is going to be something we see play in standard. This is a nice card if it ends up being a good deck. Gives you a little bit of protection, keeps you from dying early. So you get a 4 mana, basically 2/2/3 taunts for 4, and you draw your big minions to start stacking them up in hand. But like I said, then you've got these big minions in hand, and it's hard for you to survive until you can play your big crazy spell. I did want to mention this guy because this is one that kind of gets around that drawback, right? Because its death rattle says draw another undead and summon a copy of it. So maybe you're playing this on turn 9, and that gives you a little bit of survivability. Maybe it then brings back one of these things. You draw this from your deck, it puts one in play. That's pretty strong. And then you can follow it up from the other side. So that card will definitely be a part of this if it is going to work. I just don't think it's going to work, unfortunately. Makes me sad because it looks super fun, but probably going to be a meme. Next up for Shaman, we have the Death Rattle package. So the first card I want to talk about is probably the one that I'm most excited about with this package, and when I think if the deck is good, it will be good because of this, is Scourge Troll. It's a 1/3 undead. Death Rattle is given to this minion trigger twice. That's crazy. That is just absolutely nuts. And there's very obvious synergy in one of the other cards, Deathweaver Aura. So just imagine going turn 1 Scourge Troll, turn 2 giving it this. If they kill that, you now get 4 3/2 zombies, right? That's crazy. That's a huge sticky board to fall very early in the game. Now that said, this is only a 1/3, right? So they can just ignore it, leave it on board until they're ready to kill the 3/2s that come out and then kill it. And that's kind of a bummer, right? So there needs to be enough pressure from your other cards from your deck in order to force them to actually kill this stuff. So some of the other stuff, Shadow Confusion, give your minions Death Rattle, deal 3 to a random enemy. Notice this one is all your minions, whereas the 2-drop Deathweaver Aura is just one minion, that Death Rattle. I think Shadow Confusion overall is a much stronger card. I don't think you're that excited about the 2-drop. I don't think you're excited about this card unless you're putting it on the Scorch Troll. It just doesn't seem that exciting otherwise. All right. The other card for this package that looks kind of sweet is the Rotgale. It's a legendary. It's an undead Murloc. So Battlecry, give your other minions Death Rattle, give your minions +1/+1. So this gives all of your minions on board, give your minions +1/+1 as a Death Rattle. So if it's on the Scorch Troll, it's going to trigger twice and give all your other minions +2/+2. Problem with this is they all need to die. So you need like a sticky board, and you need to give them the +1/+1 Death Rattle, so that when they die and respawn minions, that those minions get the +1/+1. And it needs to all be in the correct order so that the minions spawn first and then the Death Rattle goes off. Anyone who plays Battlegrounds knows Death Rattles go off in a certain order, and when it comes to Standard, it's based on order played. So you got to be very, very careful with that. You want this to be the last thing you played so that the Death Rattle for that goes off after your respawn Death Rattles. Overall, I think this is a really cool package. I don't think it's a very likely to work in Standard right away, but maybe they give us some synergies to go with this later on down the road. That said, Rotgale is interesting because Murlocs already kind of want, a couple bigger Murlocs to cheat out early, right? So this is interesting in that sense, and maybe this sees play just because it's a Murloc and you can cheat it out with Clownfish. But the rest of this package I don't see being a player in Standard. Last up for today, we're going to do Paladin. So Paladin, I think, got maybe the best set of cards of any of the classes. We're going to start out with what I guess I'm going to call it the self-damaging, but it's really like it's an aggro package of cards I'm going to talk about real quick. So first up, Seal of Blood. So this is a give a minion +3/+3 and Divine Shield, deal 3 damage to your hero. So that's kind of the theme of this, is it's a overstated effect, and then you take damage to pay basically for the bonus power. It's blood for power, right? That's kind of the theme. I like it. This card is insane. Think about Blessing of Kings, 4 mana, give a minion 4, +4/+4, not Divine Shield. This gives a Divine Shield and +3/+3, and deals, and then of course you get 3 damage to your face, but it's Paladin, right? We have a lot of healing in Paladin that you can play to get that back. This card's insane. I will be surprised if this card does not see play. I see aggro buff like style Paladin coming back. This is kind of like Hand of a Doll power level to me. It's just a crazy, crazy card. I wouldn't be surprised to see this nerfed at some point. Maybe it becomes 4. I don't know. This card seems crazy to me. I cannot believe it's +3 and Divine Shield. Like, that's just incredibly strong, right? Next up is Sanguine Soldier. So this is a 1 mana, 2/1 Divine Shield. Insane. That's an insane rate. Really strong. Battle Cry, deal 2 to your hero. So that's the downside, right? Power, blood for power. You're paying life for power. I don't think you're going to mind paying 2 life when you're playing a 2/1 Divine Shield on board the first turn. It's extremely hard to get off the board. It's got 2 power. It trades favorably into other minions. You're going to play this, and then you're going to be able to follow it up with something like 4 Kel'Thuzos, another new card. Give a friendly minion +3 attack, and give your hero +2 attack this turn. So I think this is a curve. The 1-drop, right? The Sanguine Soldier into 4 Kel'Thuzos is going to be a curve that makes people rage and scream very often, because that's a 5/1 Divine Shield on turn 2, and you get to attack the clear whatever minion they have on board and potentially stop them from attacking back. Now, if there's a lot of 1/3 scene play, this gets a lot worse, but I still think that curve from this card is going to make for some really scary boards early on. And for the last couple cards that I kind of grouped into this aggro package, Blood Crusader. It's a 6-mana 5/5, which is not a great rate, right? But Battlecry, your next Paladin minion that this turn costs health instead of mana. So I don't necessarily think this goes in the same deck as Seal of Blood, Sanguine Soldier, Kel'Thuzos, all that stuff, but it might. Just think of the curve of Blood Crusader into like Anachronos. If you're behind on board, that's a turn early. Yeah, you pay 7 life, but you get an 8/8. You hide your 5/5 for later, and you completely clear their board for 2 turns. Like their board that they built doesn't come back. So that to me right there is going to be an insane power play that I think aggro decks could probably run. You just run 2 of this, and then you cheat out. Like cheating on mana. If you haven't learned this yet in Hearthstone, cheating on mana is one of the most broken things you can do usually. And if there's a card that literally lets you cast or lets you cheat like up to 10 mana, it's probably going to be good at some point. And in Paladin, like we said, there's a lot of ways to heal. So this is going to be really good. Next up, I'm going to talk about Blood Matriarch or Liadrin. After you summon a minion with less attack than this, give it Divine Shield and Rush. This is one of the best aggro cards I think they've printed in a long time. Reminds me of Lushwater Scout, which if you've played against Murloc, Shaman, and Wild, or basically Murlocs in any format, Lushwater Scout is the card that you see and you're like, oh crap, what am I going to do? There's a Lushwater Scout, I have to kill that. And if you can't kill it, you usually lose the game. All right, this is going to be very similar to that. So any minion that you play with less than 3 attack to start will get Divine Shield and Rush, which is really good. So like, even like your hero powers, you can play this hero power, you get a 1/1 Divine Shield and Rush. It's not terrible, but it's not amazing. However, any of these buffs, right? Steel Blood for Quel'Thalos, if you give those buffs to Liadrin, you have a 6 attack Liadrin. Now suddenly basically all of your minions are going to be coming in with Divine Shield and Rush. That's very, very, very strong. And if you can give it Seal of Blood, it now has Divine Shield and is even harder to kill. And it's going to be almost impossible for them to get a minion to stick because you are playing all these Divine Shield Rush minions to clear their stuff. So they basically have to have direct damage to remove it, or they're just never going to kill it. It's going to be very, very, very strong. Love this card. I think this is probably... Aggro Paladin is probably the deck that's going to get the biggest boost from this set. This is the cards that I see seeing play right now. All right. The next package that we got for Paladin is Dragon package. This package is really, 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 really good too. Really too. This package is really good too, I think. So let's just start out. We got here Daring Drake. This is probably the weakest of the bunch. This is the one I think this will see. This is one of those cards that's a synergy card. It'll see play if the dragon deck is good. It won't see any play at all if the dragon deck is not good. And I guess that's pretty obvious. It does have if you're holding the dragon trigger, but a 4-mana 5/5 rush, even with the trigger, a 4-mana 5/5 rush isn't that insane. Like think about the dragon we got last year that was reduced by the different minion types you had. You could get that down to like 1 or 2, and it was a 5/5. So this compared to that, it's pretty sad. It's not super exciting, but the rest of the cards are. So first one we're going to talk about is Flight of the Bronze. This is a 1-mana Discover a Dragon. Pretty good. That's fine. Like you don't mind having this. It gives you more dragons to fill out your curve. You can take whatever dragon you need for the curve for whatever you need. Lets you discover more of the legendary, which we'll talk about in just a second. And then if you mana thirst it for 7, so if you play it after turn 7, basically turn 7 or later, you also get a 5/5 Drake with Taunt, which is a dragon. Here you go, Bronze Defender. Pretty nice art too. Now, this card looks pretty good just on basic rate, but when you see it with the next card, it looks absolutely crazy. So next up is the card that I think, if Dragon Paladin works, will be the reason Dragon Paladin works, is Time Warden. It says until the end of your next turn, so you have the turn you play it and the following turn, dragons you summon gain taunt and divine shield. So you play this, followed up with this, even on the same turn a lot of time, you have a divine shield, 5/5 divine shield taunt for 1 mana, or the curve I'm even more excited about is Anachronos. So 7 mana, you play this. Maybe you have a couple dragons on board, but their board's kind of scary. You're like, you know what? Let's bounce my board. So you play this, bounce a couple dragons, following turn, play Time Warden. And then once your dragons come back from this, they all come in with Divine Shield and Taunt. So it's just very, very strong. We also got, I have to mention, in the neutral set, Amber Whelp, which is a 3 mana dragon. 3/3. If you're holding a dragon, deal 3 damage. So really, really good early game. Really, really good early game. And something cheaper you can play alongside your Time Warden to get that Divine Shield Taunt buff. All right. Divine Shield Taunts are very good for helping you survive, very good for giving you time to set up your more powerful combos. And this card's just insane. This is probably the best, I think the best card on rate in the whole set. If you're including all of the Death Knight cards from the core set and Path of Arthas, maybe not. But this card is just incredibly strong. It's like a board clear that gives you an 8/8 at the same time. Similar to how the Death Knights got the 8 mana one, but that's only a 5/5, right? I know these minions come back, but the thing is you have the priority, right? They come back in 2 turns, and I would assume the way it's worded that they come back in 2 turns on your turn. So if you can set up time to get an actual clear ready, or you can just build an overwhelming board and then just kill them. Like, the other thing is, if you play this, you now have an 8/8 on board. And if they just pass for 2 turns waiting for their board to come back, they're going to die because this is an 8/8. So they kind of have to kill this. So they kind of have to get onto the board to counteract what you're doing, which then means they may not even get those minions back at all, which is, there's another check on the box for this card. I think this card is nutty. I love it. It's one of my favorite designs they've ever done. I cannot wait to play it. So I'm excited to see how it goes. All right, and that actually wraps it up. I'm gonna do Death Knight in a separate video because, well, for one, this video is already getting extremely long, and there's just so many Death Knight cards to go over. There's almost as many Death Knight cards to go over total as there are other cards from the entire set. So we'll do a Death Knight video where I kind of do the same thing, go over the different synergy packages, and then we'll talk about what I think is going to be good in those as well. But in closing, I think Paladin, Warrior, Mage, Demon Hunter got probably the best, followed by maybe Rogue. But honestly, Hunter, it's really hard to say what we'll see play right now, because a lot of these synergy packages seem really good. They just don't necessarily seem good enough compared to what we already have in standard. So I'm a little disappointed because I think once the dust settles, a lot of this stuff won't be seen play. But we can hope, right? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe some of this stuff ends up making it in. I cannot wait to play with Soul Eater Scythe. It's gonna be a lot of cool stuff going on this set. So if you want to come and hang out with me on Tuesday when the set launches, I will be playing basically all day, playing all sorts of cool new decks, new exciting decks, and hopefully I'll see you there.